First and foremost, would like to say that we are so honored and thankful to have here today the presence of judges, the honorable judges, Lisa Walsh and Lisette Sheridan Harris, as well as Professor Marike Paulsen. I will let the introduction to these brilliant contributors to our live today take place via the words of Professor Marike Paulsen. I would just like to let you know this is our fifth live on gender and peace, sponsored by the Global Legal Institute for Peace Studies and Conflict Resolution at the University of São Paulo. We have divided our works, academic works, and also works of extension to reach out to society in a few different areas. And one of the areas is gender and diversity. The other one is cybersecurity, also leading with employment and entrepreneurship and innovation. So this live is specific guided towards gender and peace, and it will be our fifth one today. We have dealt with issues of culture, domestic violence, health, and today we're dealing with the issue of justice for all. So it's a great pleasure to have you all here today. And Professor Marike Paulsen, please, the word is yours.
Thank you, Jay, my dear friend. Welcome to the audience, and also welcome to all of those who are going to be looking at this YouTube. First of all, this is a gathering, but it's a very informal gathering. The idea of today is that we're going to have a discussion among friends. So before I introduce the judges, I want to start with maybe a little bit of an anecdote. This is about women empowerment. It's about women's rights. It's about equality. And I think all women who are trying to succeed and make a difference have mentors. I'm going to introduce two women who are absolutely phenomenal. One I consider to be a friend whom I've known for longer, thanks to my days in Miami, and another one whom I've been introduced to thanks to my friend. So I'm going to start with Judge Lisa Walsh, who is a judge in Miami. So Judge Walsh is a circuit court judge in the 11th Judicial Circuit. Now, I know that this doesn't mean a lot to our foreign audience, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. And she is now serving as the administrative judge of the Appellate Division. She also, like I just said, serves in the International Arbitration Division and served in the Criminal Civil Dependency Divisions and is a former county court judge, which means you already know so much more than us very narrowly focused international arbitration lawyers. One thing that I want to lift out of your resume is what you've done for women and the many awards that you have received, given that our series, these webinars are about women empowerment. You were the president of the National Association of Women Judges. You are an adjunct professor, but you've also been honored many, many times. And I was hesitating, should I now list all these awards? Normally we don't, but I think we should. We should, because there are many young women who are going to look up to this. You have received numerous awards: the 2018 Florida Bar Young Lawyers Division Outstanding Jurist Award, the 2018 Judge Stephen Levine Award, the 2018 Justice Vano Spencer Leadership Award for the National Association of Women Judges, the 2017 Dade County Bar Association President's Award as Outstanding Community Leader, the Deborah Judge Award by the Miami Jewish Legal Society, the 2019 Community Service Award for the Greater Miami Jewish Federation, and I can actually go on. There's more. So I think all of our listeners want to know, how did you do it? So that's the question that I'm going to ask you. So then Judge Walsh said to me, if we're going to do this webinar, I know a judge who's absolutely fabulous, and I think she needs to join. And we're happy that last minute you were able to join us, Judge Lisette Sheridan Harris. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. When I read your resume, the one thing I wanted to know is how did you do it? So you were elected to the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas in November 2005 and retained for a second term in 2015. And so you have the same broad expertise, going from domestic relations branch of the family division, major felony branch of the criminal trial division, and now you're a team leader in the complex litigation section, which handles mass torts, non-jury arbitration appeal matters in the civil trial division. That's a lot. But what really, really impressed me is, and again, since we are now hosting this with the Global Legal Institute for Peace, and we work with UN, we work with many organizations, you have presented twice at the Vatican's Pontifical Academy at its Summit on Human Trafficking, its Summit on Social Justice and the Courts. You've presented at the United Nations on gender discriminatory laws and the role of judges. You are the past co-chair and first Judicial District's Judicial Education Committee, and you're appointed to the Pennsylvania Conference of State Trial Judges Education. And it goes on. And again, because we're talking about women empowerment, I think this is something important to know for all of us around the world, is that you are now the international director of the National Association of Women Judges. You serve as the U.S. North American delegate to the International Association of Women Judges. You were the former chair of the National Bar Association Judicial Council, and it goes on and on and on. And why this is so impressive for both of you is that you have these careers. It is a broad range of fields of law, which most lawyers actually don't do. So I've done international arbitration for 20 years, so needless to say, I should know something about it. But while you've had these professional careers, you have really helped the cause by leading the Women's Judges Association, being part of the International Women's Judges Association. And then you have done all this work for human rights, trafficking, etc., which is really something we respect immensely. I see this on paper, and I can only imagine how much time and perseverance that takes. So normally I don't do this. Normally I don't take resumes and share all the details of a resume with the audience, because most speakers that I've moderated, honestly, it wasn't that interesting. But what you've done is really a dream. And I think there are many young listeners who want to know why. So, or why and how and what were the hurdles? Why were those hurdles there, and how did you deal with them? So it's going to be your personal stories. But before we do that, let's go to the present. So it's 2020. Jay and I are close friends. We talk to each other all the time. And we said, I think it was about December 2019, we said 2020 is going to be the year. And we said, we're going to do work with UN Women. We're going to do our conferences. We're going to go to New York for the UN Women He for She Week. And we had great plans. And then coronavirus, pandemic, first China, then it came to us, Iran next door, then Europe, the US, and here we are. Some countries are getting out of the lockdown, others aren't, and it has had an impact. So what we discussed previously is, how has this impacted women? And what I shared with you when we talked about today's webinar is, I had read some articles and interviews by Sheryl Sandberg from the US, who said COVID is impacting women more than men. So one thing that she said is, when it comes to homeschooling and teleworking, somehow it's the women who have to take care of the children, if that woman is the breadwinner. Then apparently there's data that women suffer from anxiety right now, that women are the first to lose their jobs. And we talked about this, and then you shared something with me that I didn't think about, which is actually the positive note and the good things about this pandemic and how women can shine. So that's something I want to start with. Let's start with Judge Walls. What is your take on what women can do right now in times of the pandemic?
There's a lot. There's a lot rolled into your preface and your ultimate question. The first thing that I really want to address is, which I think leads to the answer of, there's a lot of positive to take from this, and there is actually a roadmap that we're designing while we're driving the car. We're fixing planes while we're in the air. But there is something in the preface to your question that I think could be of use to men and women that might be listening on this meeting, at this meeting. For myself, I think a flaw or a trait, however you wish to see it, that I have, at least in my professional life and maybe even in my personal life too, is that, like, I imagine all of you, I have a default button. I have a default position. And my default position on whether I'm ever asked anything, and I suspect that Judge Sheridan Harris is very much like me on this, my default button is yes. And it can make for a crazy life. It can make for a very cluttered, full, many balls in the air at the same time, multitasking, wild life. Even more so when you're not in COVID and you have the capacity to travel or to explore or to go to events when work is over for the day. So that default button being yes, I suspect, is not something that is idiosyncratic to me. And the second is that I get so much joy and energy and it just fulfillment in life from being part of a group, from camaraderie, from the support that I get from other friends, coworkers, colleagues, fellow judges who are on the bench, and these groups that you mentioned. Nobody goes through life thinking, I want to gain a certain position or I want to receive a certain award, and they give it to themselves. The only way that you really achieve anything in life is through that collegial sense of camaraderie, co-working, and everyone pushing each other to achieve something better for their system, better for in our case, better for our court, better for our justice system, and better for all the people that we serve. So, in answer to your prefatory question, there are reasons why Judge Sheridan Harris and I seek what we seek and why our resumes look the way that they do. And it's not because I individually am so terrific, but more that my default button is yes. This sounds interesting. I'd like to get involved with this. I see a problem. Let's work on this together. And through that impulse of community-based, group-based working together, we all raise ourselves and we solve problems better and we achieve more personal success. That's just the truth. So when we were talking yesterday about COVID, and yes, I think the brunt of the grunt work on COVID, I've never cleaned my house as much as I have in the last 3 months. I've never had such a sense of when the laundry needed to be done or whether there was too much dog hair that was spread throughout my living room with my 2 giant dogs. And I've never had so much concern about which meals have been cooked when or what's the state of my groceries, or what's going on with my daughter or what my husband might need. And in addition to that, my job hasn't stopped. So I imagine that, like many other women, we all have our own little microcosm at home, and our culture, and I imagine many other places around the world, it's the same. The historical culture of women and families is that we do take the brunt of taking care of home and family and children and education and marriage. And also, we want just the same amount of fulfillment and success and monetary reward as our mate in our professional life as well. So that makes for, in the wake of a pandemic, a lot of pressure and a lot more responsibility and work. Generally, I would say that's true on women. But there is an upshot. We at NAWJ, our National Association of Women Judges, embarked on a technological program in order to improve messaging to our members and in order to reach beyond our borders and to the justice community at large in the United States. And through putting together a series of webinars addressing our issues, which are jury trial, continued service to the marginalized populations, being able to process our cases, I noticed that quite a few chief justices in our states happen to be women. And, I don't particularly think, I think equality means equally good or equally bad or equally mediocre. I don't think that women are special. But the fact is that women have these opportunities to lead entire states. And if you are familiar with the difference between the states and the United States, some of our states are the size of European countries. So it's enormous responsibility, and they're thriving and I would say from our observation doing rather well, or as well as their male counterparts. So I think that there is opportunity for leadership and opportunity for success. And the fact that we're used to having all these balls in the air, that we're used to all this multitasking, may mean that we are suited, with our default button being yes, how high can I jump and what more can I do, to actually have the opportunity to take the pandemic as an opportunity to demonstrate that we can thrive and we can succeed.
Right, and I think that's so true. We are the shoulders, and again, what we've said so many times, and with our organization, this is not to say bad things about the men. Brazil, the University of Sao Paulo, collaborates with UN Women on the He for She pledge. The president of the University of Sao Paulo works for women's rights, and that's something I think my mother understood, like, oh, this is our battle, the women versus the men. And that's definitely not what we are about. But it's absolutely true that although men and women are equal or should be equal, we are different, and we are the shoulders. And you're entirely right. I think just normally during our careers, we have to, we're the mothers, the daughters, the wives, and try to handle our career. And our inclination is to care for everybody. So maybe you are right that maybe we're well suited. And I didn't think of that. I think the last 3 months, the only thing I thought about is, gosh, my work was already very intense. And now I have to homeschool. So I have 2 jobs and I'm not sleeping anymore. And I just want this to be over. And I never thought, wait a second, I can use this moment to start projects and to think about initiatives and to get out there, like the webinars that we're doing right now. So I think that's a really important point. And I'm really hoping that people who are listening, the women, don't think, okay, I'm counting the days until the end of the school year. I'm counting the days until I can get back to normal because I'm just barely getting by. Just switch something inside and think about what you always wanted to do and just do it. So Judge Sheridan Harris, what is your take on this in times of COVID?
So, first of all, it's just not everybody and having a chance to speak. And when I think about just the gender disparity, I think it is real. I think that we have the issue of women that are in the home that would not be confined for as long a period with the domestic violence. And the domestic violence might be up, but the reporting is not up because they don't have the luxury of getting out to report or having time alone to report. The low-paying jobs, which historically fall to women, they either are not working or those that are in jobs, nursing, which is primarily a female job, are going out and then having to come back home. The stress level of contamination during COVID, of infecting their family, then being caretakers. So I think there's so many different things that play in now that there is that disparity. And thank goodness, like Judge Wall said, and you alluded to, the number of women in positions of power, and especially for us in the States on the bench, can and are making a difference in terms of the thought process, because we think of all those balls that we have to juggle anyway. So let's see now with technology what we can do to continue to provide fair and equal justice in this age of remote courtrooms, remote access to everything. And I think that a couple of good things came out of this. I have a lot of group chats now that before I did not have time for, although I'm juggling everything. I have a little more time to make the schedule my own, which is very different than before. I'm still juggling all of the same balls, but I have groups that I'm able to look at best practices. I have one dear friend in Kenya who sent a text saying, I just delivered 50 opinions from the bench. This was 2 weeks after the stay-at-home order was in place. Who would think that could happen? And what she said is technology has now become our greatest friend. And I think we'll learn how to use things differently and use them in the best way that we can. And in Philadelphia, talking about ours is considered the first judicial district. We have a president judge who is female, and most of our leadership is female. And we have pretty much an equal bench, men and women. And I think that together, the common conversation has been, what can we do to move things along?
Thank you. That's the spirit. And I must say, and this is what I love about the Global Legal Institute for Peace and University of Sao Paulo and what we do here. We have so many countries right now in this sort of virtual room. What I love about the United States of America, and I think that's very important to say right now with everything that is happening in your country. I've lived there for 10 years. I'm Dutch, and I first thought we are the same. I don't know why I thought that, but I thought that. In many ways, we are not the same. In many ways, I think the Netherlands is so ahead of the United States, especially when it comes to human rights, whether it's women's rights or civil rights, or LGBT rights for that matter. We are way ahead. But one thing I love about the US, and that's what you just did, it's this attitude. It's the glass is half full. It's the we're going to do this together. It's the we're going to make something out of this. And you probably don't realize that, how unique that is to you, Americans. The Dutch, they love to complain in times like this. So this is very inspirational for all of us. Now, going away from COVID, because one day this will be over and it will still be a topic, women's rights, women empowerment. So I keep on going back to Sheryl Sandberg, but I find her, I can say this publicly, I'm Dutch. I find her rather controversial. Although I admire her, I think some of her views will not work everywhere else in the world. So one thing that she has said is we must lean in, and she wrote a book about that. And obviously she has made it. She's one of the few women who is where she is. That's admirable. But then she said, there are rules of the game. They're for men. And I've learned in order to make it, I'm going to play by those rules and I'm going to advance. Now, others have disagreed with that because if you do that as a woman, you're never changing the rules. My personal view is we have to change the rules. We have to be a voice. I just learned last night that clearly my Dutch mother seems not to agree with that. So I want to have your view and after that, the view of Judge Walz on that.
Okay. So there's a saying, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. And when I think about that, all of us have to own our power. And you talk about Sheryl Sandberg, her book has a part in it about the meeting where the women came in and sat on the side. And the boss sat at the table and she invited them to sit at the table. I think all of us in our positions would sit at the table. So starting from that premise, I think it's important that when we sit at the table, we do speak up. And we talked before about the need for there to be more than one woman, more than one person of color, to make that voice a collective voice and to really make it heard. And I think that as we go on, I think we do have power and the collective voice is best, but we all can make a difference one step at a time. And one great example is what has happened in the US in the past week with the civil protests. And we see corporations, and it's been triggered all around the world, but corporations and people that may not have heard the same discussion are now listening very differently, and not only listening, trying to figure out what they can do, because there are different voices and a collective voice that is speaking so loud that it can't be ignored.
Yes. Again, I would even imagine, I'm looking at Jay, that even Brazil, the world is watching. I think Hillary Clinton in one debate with Donald Trump said, just talk as if your children are listening. Right now, for the United States, the world is listening and watching. And the world is your stage right now. And it's incredibly powerful. And I'm hopeful for a change, but my philosophy is always, let's be really, really stubborn, and let's be loud, and let's just stay there, be in somebody's face, and just not go away until there's a change. So this is not really the sort of using the honey or being very, feminine and cute. This is actually using your powerful voice, because we as women have power. So Judge Walls, what is your idea about the leaning in philosophy?
Well, it occurred to me when you were speaking about your mother, that are the generations that come before us, whether it's your mother or a mentor, have such a profound effect on how it is that we conduct ourselves simply by the way they modeled for us. My mother was not a typical mother. She was a soldier. Other mothers may have wanted to go shopping. She actually she raised me in a very different way. So the end result of that is that I've been somewhat oblivious. I'm certainly not oblivious to my gender, or I wouldn't be so involved and surround myself with so many extraordinary, wonderful, and powerful women. But in my professional life, it doesn't occur to me how I'm being perceived until I'm reminded of how I'm perceived. So I just go about my job, and I don't consciously think that I'm emulating the way a man would be doing their job if they were me. I'm just doing my job and conducting myself in the way that I was raised, if that makes any sense. And so I read that book. I read her book and thought to myself, perhaps I would be more successful in achieving whatever it is that I was setting out to achieve if I incorporated those notions of collaboratively trying to achieve ends instead of authoritatively and individually trying to achieve ends. I'll take any good idea that I can, but it is very, very difficult to, I think you come across as false and inauthentic if you try to be a way that you are not naturally in your day-to-day life. So I'm not sure, honestly, the value, except I do maintain that there is tremendous value in not going it alone and incorporating multiple voices. When you say amplify your power or speak loudly, I think you speak best when you reach across and you communicate with the people that you work with, the people that you care about, the people that are suffering more than you, frankly, and you try to amplify those voices and solve problems with a collective voice. If you can, you get further. You get further in solving a problem. We talked a little bit last night about as judges, inappropriate behavior in the courtroom or how you're perceived. And I've been brought up short before by realizing just very bluntly in the moment by the way a particular lawyer has addressed me, and I think that Judge Sheridan Harris actually has better examples than I. which I would love to hear about. But I'm, as I said, really not going about my life in such an intentional, conscious way, conscious of my gender or how I'm being perceived, but I'm reminded of it. That's the truth.
Well, it's so interesting because, and I'm hoping that my mother is happy that I'm listening to her and introducing this webinar, Women Empowerment, with her anecdote, which really she is definitely my inspiration, because what's interesting, when she tells me you have to use honey, she's probably one of the strongest women I've met in my life. She instills fear in men. And she definitely does not think about what other people, or if people would be afraid, or, she has a strong mind and has been extremely successful in her career. And maybe she's a little bit afraid right now, seeing how much I'm like her and thinking, oh, we need to tone this down a bit. But so I think if you have strong role models, that gives you confidence, right? Because I didn't know anything else. And so it's like you, when for my career, I actually not very often have thought about, oh gosh, what are they thinking of me? Maybe I should. Maybe I could have prevented a lot of calamities. But it's also a personal choice, and I think that's very important for these webinars and the takeaways. When young ladies are listening and thinking, okay, I now need to do this. No, this is very individual. You have a certain style. You have a certain background. If you're uncomfortable with either being strong or ladylike, then do what fits you. I think what I like is the statement of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's definitely my idol. I think she must also be your idol. And Jay will know this, when I did the TED Talk in Sao Paulo, I started with her. And she had, with a quote, she had said in an interview, I was taught by my mother that to be independent is to be a lady. And so that is independence. And I thought that was a very good way of putting it. When you're a woman, you are feminine, but you're powerful at the same time, and you're independent at the same time, but it has to suit you. So I think that for some, the leaning in might work. I'm not a fan. And I also have to say, I felt I saw that more in the United States than, for example, in the Netherlands. So sometimes we can actually learn a lot from the Netherlands. So Judge Sheridan Harris, would you mind sharing your anecdote with us today?
I'll share the anecdote. And it's interesting listening to both of you. I think the three of us share a very common thread in that our mothers, I think I shared yesterday, are some of our greatest role models. And I can remember my mother, who has her PhD in social research, she did the convocation many, many, many years ago on the need for greater diversity at her university. And it's so interesting that I have followed basically in her footsteps. So it's interesting, and you talk about the young people. I think everybody has to find, for the young people that are listening, you have to find the voice that is best for you. And it is so different for everyone. And once you find that voice, your level of confidence will just be incredible. But find that voice. And we talked yesterday about getting the respect as a judge or as a woman walking into a meeting or boardroom, and whether you should dress a certain way, whether you should wear the business suit buttoned up. And so that's right. So when we talk about how we have to command respect and the best way to do it, we talked about, I shared two different ones, so I'm not sure which anecdote. So the first one was when I was in law school, and that is to the issue of how to present yourself. When I was in law school, my mother came to visit, and I had my first mock trial where I actually had to go to the courthouse. And I came out dressed, and I was so impressed. And I had found some glasses with just window pane glasses, clear frames, and put them on and put my hair back in a nice, neat bun. And my mother looked up and said, "Where are you going?" And in my mind, that's what I needed to do to fit in, to look like one of the boys, if you will. And she reminded me right then that I had to be true to who I was. And I've conformed that in different ways over the years, but I always remember that. And know now when I walk in someplace, the first thing they notice may be your gender. Will be your gender. And for me as a Black woman, they'll notice that I am a Black woman. I can't hide it, don't want to hide it. And so there are those implicit biases. And then from there, you decide what you need to do to dress or to appear the way you need to appear to get your message across. And being on the bench, another anecdote in terms of getting respect. We talked yesterday about being female, and Judge Walsh and I went on the bench close to the same time, so appearing younger as well. And having been in front of different judges or working with different attorneys, generally in law school, you're taught when you address the court, you stand. And I'd find that the same attorneys that I might have been working with before in the courtroom who would stand for a judge or in another courtroom would stand, they come in my courtroom and remain seated while they're talking. So very early on, they learned that all I had to do was just like this, and they'd stand, and I never had that problem again. And when a new attorney would come in the room, if it was somebody that they knew, you'd see them nudge the person and say, stand up. And it worked, one little thing, but you learn to know that people come in with different biases, and you just do what you do, and knowing that eventually whatever they thought, whatever preconceived notions they may have had, will go out of the window, and you'll be able to work a lot more productively.
That is such a powerful story. I hope you know how powerful this anecdote is. And that is really a way of changing the rules and showing people who you are. And that is one thing that I think many of us women see. When you're really young, it is what you are. You're in your 20s, you are a junior, you are a minion at a law firm. Fine, you have to learn. I think you will also have a lot less liberties as to how you dress. This is actually really a dilemma for women. What do we do and how do we get judged, often by other women? Then at some point you get more senior, you get different positions, and often what happens to us is, oh, they think we're younger than we are. We're babies. And then all of a sudden you're too senior, which is, you can never win. It's unfair. And I think then it's up to us to make ourselves heard and to make clear that we are also senior. And that's one thing that I think the both of you really appreciated when I shared my story of how Professor Damiani J. and I met in India, which was for an international law conference. We were there with Professor Martin Hunter, who was also a vice president, had nothing to do with anything else. We go to the tribal school, see 20,000 tribal children. It's a transformative moment in your life. Jay and I become friends. I go to Sao Paulo for a law conference. He invites me to an event. And then at some point later on, we have lunch and he says, we're going to set up the Global Legal Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Would you like to be one of the vice presidents? And I was very aware that somebody like Martin Hunter is so much more experienced, that normally these positions go to, certain men of a certain color over a certain age. And I remember coming home and saying to my husband, I am so grateful that Jay gave that opportunity to me. That is also very much what you described yesterday, the he for she, that men have a different mindset, are open-minded and inclusive, and give somebody like me that opportunity, which is something that Jay did. So going from these anecdotes to what happens to us as women, and talking about he for she, as I discussed yesterday, there is the she for she. This is incredibly important. The leader of my firm, Madeleine Albright, at the time of the elections with Hillary Clinton has said, women who do not support other women, for them there's a special place in hell. Now, she has actually said recently, that's not exactly what I meant. It has to be, it has to have a positive tone. And I think all of us have had experiences where, without wanting to use bad words, sometimes there are other women who are not so nice. And they try to bring you down. They try to create gossip, and some even try to get you fired. We all have our anecdotes, which we don't have to share publicly, but we all know. I was at a women's event luncheon at the American Society of International Law. And I stood up and I said, how about women supporting each other? Because I've had experiences of women really backstabbing me. Nobody reacted. You could hear a pencil drop. After the lunch, women were lining up to talk to me and said, oh gosh, this happened to me, and I know what you, so there's so much pain. I know Judge Walz really has something to say about that. So I give you the floor. Also, I want to learn from you. How would you implement the she for she? How can we really make this happen? So I'll give the floor to Judge Walz.
It's all modeling. I have benefited so much from my relationships with other women, and not exclusively. I would never have been able to have my own law firm, but for the mentorship and the generosity of a lot of men who are lawyers in my, in my community. And I'm a huge proponent and very appreciative of many senior partners around the United States, and specifically in my little community, who have mentored and supported and financially advanced the interests of exceptional women lawyers in their midst, and judges, frankly. We couldn't get where we're going if we didn't have the support of all lawyers in our community. But I think modeling is the answer. I think you have to live it, and you have to show the world, look at me and my crew. I have mentored, and so have you, Marika, and I'm sure that you have as well, Judge Sheridan Harris, that I have mentored so many young men and women. And the way that I look at it is that that's my army. They are always going to be in my corner. We never know where they're going to end up. They're going to be powerful people someday. They're mine because I back them up, because I didn't stab anyone in the back, because I didn't shut the door behind me after I went through it. You are more powerful in life, in your trajectory, the more that you can be supporting and embracing and lift other people up with you, after you, before you, however it might be. You really are. And it's been a proven formula for me, certainly in my life. It's a happier way to live. There's joy in that life. And those, I know the other brand of woman, if you will. It's true. Maybe they will get ahead of me in the moment because they successfully tanked my chances when it was between me and them for something. All of us have those stories, but I'm not going to bear a grudge. I'm not going to hold it against them. I'm still going to be a good colleague, and they will see me in my joyful, collaborative, fun, exciting life, frankly, surrounded by other like-minded people who all move ourselves forward. It's all modeling and demonstrating that you're not powerful if you stand alone. You're really not. Your power is always, it's going to be a negative power. One of the most powerful kingmakers in my community is that way because he lives his life making sure that every person who he has mentored, who has worked for him, is successful for their entire life. And that way, when he makes a phone call, people pick it up. When he speaks, people listen. So that's just truth. And I think we have to embrace it and not worry about those that just are not with that program. I don't worry about it. I'm not going to tell bad stories. I'm not going to stab anyone in the back in turn. And that's a moral issue on my part. I'm not living that way.
I have goosebumps. And I'm also now all of a sudden, you've really left me speechless. It's karma. And one thing that I've always noticed about you, why it was so fun the first time we did a panel together at Halloween, and you were all for, the costumes and let's do this. And you're a judge, and I did not expect that from a judge. But there's one thing just after what you said, and you're a happy person. I want to say one thing to the women who are listening, and the women who are in that other group, because I do care about that, because it hurts. And I've been hurt many, many times, and I didn't see it coming. And the person who really picked me up every time was my mother. And she said one thing. She said, maybe they're jealous. Maybe they're insecure. And there's one thing that I noticed when this happened again. I reached out to that woman and I said, could we have lunch? And I sort of disarmed her by saying, I'm sorry. I think I might have done something wrong. I should have talked to you. Whatever it is, let's talk about it. And she did not expect that, because I responded to her actions with kindness. And all of a sudden, she just let her guard down. And I could see this insecurity and unhappiness. And maybe she was insecure in her position and felt that she had to keep others, far away. And once you just reach out to that person, you could actually change that other person. And I do hope that we can all do that. But our sisterhood is really what keeps us going. I don't think I would still be working right now were it not for my sisterhood. So with that, I want to give the floor to Judge Sheridan Harris to tell her story about the She for She.
Well, I have a little different take, and I think we've all experienced the woman that didn't support you. In defense of that woman that didn't support you, we are oftentimes fighting for that one position, whereas other people don't have that issue. They are very secure in their position. A lot of times it is one or two slots for that woman. So there is a sense of insecurity. So not that it makes it right, but I can understand it to a certain extent. Having said that, like the both of you, what I do is I mentor. I mentor every young woman or young man that I get a chance to. And primarily because one day I'm not going to be in this position. And my hope is that they will all be in positions that they can help me and help others. So what I do is, in addition to the International Association of Women Judges, which are all my dear sisters, and the National Association of Women Judges, which are all my dear sisters, and we all do so much together. In addition to my tribe here in Philadelphia, I surround myself with supportive women and make sure that every chance I get, I teach, I mentor, I explain to anybody that will take the time to listen. And I just really think it's important as we move forward that we continue to do that. Some people don't do it necessarily in a formal setting. Some people have mentor programs. Other people just do it naturally. And I think as long as we are mentoring, and make sure your mentors and mentees may or may not look like you. The men, as you said, can be your greatest sponsors or mentors. The women, if you haven't found a great mentor or mentee, one of those women you're meant being a mentor to will become a great mentor or sponsor to someone behind them. So I think we're on the right track. And I think at the end of the day, it's really important that we all look for ways to be kind to other people. And I know for Judge Walsh and I on the bench, we actually, I think we were telling you, we met in DC on our way to the Supreme Court, I believe it was, the US Supreme Court. And we met on the bus and clicked. It was our first conference in DC together, first time in DC. We clicked and have a common bond, and that is working with other sisters and uplifting and doing our part to making sure we're doing the best that we can on the bench and in our communities.
I'm happy now. I feel uplifted, energized, inspired. We decided this was going to be an hour today. We only have 5 minutes left. And I think we are. Oh, Jay wants to say something. But you have to unmute.
If you allow me, I have one question here from the audience who asked me if I could transmit the question to the judges. It's from Professor Eloisa Pait, who is a professor of sociology at the State University of São Paulo. She spent part of her postgraduate studies in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania. And she says, I would like to hear from the judges more about how they are seeing the current protests and political situation in the United States. And also if they could talk about the possibility of an African-American female candidate for vice president and its possible impact on social justice. Big question, huh?
So I just want to make one intervention right now, because we talked about this yesterday. And I think that what I'm going to say, Judge Sheridan-Harris, you will agree with me. This is one of the most important questions today. Anyone in the world should be asking her or himself that question. My son, and I can barely say this without crying, asked me yesterday, Mommy, what color am I? And as you know, I guess in the United States, they call me biracial. So my father's, I call him in Dutch brown, my mother's white. He is Surinamese, Hindu, Dutch, Swedish. And he asked me, what color am I? I said, well, your skin color is white. And then he asked, why do white people, why are they mean to black people? And I said, because there's darkness inside of them. And he said, I think we need to have a president who's going to take care of everybody in the US. That's a short answer. I don't want to give Judge Sheridan-Harris 5 minutes to address something that is so fundamental and that hurts, that just affects us in our core. What we agreed, because I obviously also asked the question, and what we agreed to yesterday is this is what we're going to do. We have weekly webinars about women empowerment, women's rights, she for she. I think we need to have many more sessions with all the colleagues of these two judges, the women's judges, the National Women's Association, the International Women's Association, with the other judges that we know, to talk more about the she for she, the he for she, and the she for he. But we have agreed yesterday that we're going to organize a second sort of series of webinars where we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the fundamental question of my son is, why are people mean? Why is this happening? What do the protests mean? How can we empower Black women? How can we make sure there are finally African Americans who are international adjudicators? There are so many aspects to this question that it wouldn't be fair to address it in at the end of this webinar. But we will be back with these judges, with their colleagues, with other stakeholders, and we are going to give this question, this pain, this problem, this issue, we're going to give that a very strong platform and an extremely loud voice. Do you agree, Judge Sheridan-Harris, that we're going to do that?
I agree wholeheartedly. And the only thing I'll leave with is, because it is too long a subject, I think it's a good time for all of us to listen more actively.
Yes, absolutely. And there are voices, and we need to pay attention. No more walls in your face, no more looking the other way. It's enough. Here, as we say, khalas, that's what we say in this country. So I'm sure there are going to be many more questions. This is going to be in YouTube. We're going to have follow-up webinars on this so that this conversation obviously isn't over. This hour flew by. Both of you are amazing. You are an inspiration, but also your answers, your interventions today make us happy. I think that's the right word. And I think we're all energized to look at this time, this lockdown, to make not the most of it, but to make all of it. And with that, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank the two of you. This was last minute. This is absolutely amazing. Now, Judge Sheridan Harris, you're also my friend. We are a group of sisters, and the sisterhood, we just need to make it bigger and bigger. And with that, I'm going to give the floor back to Jay.
Well, I can only endorse your words, Marika. Also thank some of our supporters here, USP Women, the DA's Association of the State Office, the DA's office, who supports us as well. And, when you're talking about anecdotes, just to close with an anecdote too, I remember one from you, Professor Marika Paulsen. We're meeting with a group of men, and someone comes and says, I know your husband's book. And then you open your handbag and she says, here's mine. So, this is the type of way that you could have picked it up from saying but you don't know mine. It's like, no, okay, now you know mine as well, and that it brings on a good mood to that conversation. It teaches people, and the ideas that we have here of mentors, what Judge Lisette Sheridan Harris said, that we have to listen more. The lady who we had last week, who is the largest entrepreneur of Brazil, she said that too. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So let's practice listening. And I cannot be thankful enough to all of you, and how much I look forward to developing this contact with the University of São Paulo, with the Global Institute for Peace Studies, and Brazil. So thank you very much, President Vahana Gopian, the President of the University of São Paulo.